Welcome back, guys. Andrew with A-Team Adventures. I'm bringing you that frog video that I promised, and so we'll jump right into it here. Let's start with the frogs. So I've got a few frogs laid out here. The ones that I probably use the most, and I'm not saying I haven't used other frogs, but you know, I'll cover the ones that I use the most and some of why. You know, starting from the beginning, probably, you know, if I had just you know, a frog that I was going to fish in you know, heavier cover, and it walks really well, so I can fish it in open cover, but I tend to use this one more in heavy cover. Would be the live target here. I just pulled one out of a package. Live target Copper's frog. I don't know if you can kind of see that, but live target, and it's the Coppers. And this is, again, the larger size. Let's see, I don't know if I'm seeing it. Size, gosh, it's 2 5/8, weighs 3/4 of an ounce. I'm not sure, but there's two sizes. This is the larger size. This is the one I just pulled it out of the package. And if I had, you know, just probably one frog, that would probably, you know, I guess be it for a generic frog. Really like the frog. I guess what I like about it, it's got a tremendous hook in it. I mean, absolutely a beast of a hook. The body of the frog is so soft. I mean, so soft. It takes very little for that to collapse down and get a hook bite. And yet it comes through cover really well. It walks really easily. And yet it's a little more flat on the bottom, so it comes through a mat pretty well. And if you needed to, like a really heavy mat, a thick mat, it's big enough that it makes a bit of an, you know, a commotion up there. But you can also I'll take like little BBs or something, and I'll sometimes stuff them in the frog, and it'll weigh it down to push down on that mat, to make, you know, to make a little bit more of an impact on the mat, so the fish can see it. Now, obviously, once you get it off the mat, if you fill a frog with BBs or tungsten weight or something like that, it's going to sink like a rock when you get it off the mat. So that it will be just a heavy mat frog at that point. You won't use it for anything else. But in some really heavy mats, it's made all the difference in the world. Sometimes you can just slide it over that cheese mat, and the fish never even know it's there. Or other times I've had it where it makes a little commotion. They know it's there, they go to get it, but there's so much debris in between them and the frog, they go and they hit it and it flies out of there. Or something with a little more weight, they hit it, they bump it, and they still get it. So that's probably one of my all-around favorite frogs. And I typically go with 4 colors. 3 are most common, but there's the 4th that I use with a particular frog almost exclusively. So I'll go over that. But I like a black frog, I like a white frog, and I like a chartreuse frog, and lastly, a very natural semi-clear frog. And so I'll go over these. It's hard to find, certain colors of these are hard to find. So I like a black frog a lot. It just, boy, it works most of the time for me. That or the clear frog, it works most of the time for me. I will use there's just days when the white one works, and I will usually have 3 frog rods tied up or something like that, and I'll just mess around. If I get a bite on one, I might try another one. If they absolutely engulf it, I mean, and they choke it all the way down, I'll probably say, you know what, that's the frog. You know, I'm not going to mess around with it too much. But if I've barely got them on one hook, or, you know, barely in the lip, I'm going to start messing around with color and maybe size, depending on, you know, how well they're getting in it. If I'm catching mostly smaller fish, maybe I'm going to scale down just a little bit. Typically, a frog's a big fish bait. So again, on average, you're going to catch more bigger fish with a frog than small fish, but you'll still catch small fish. So don't think that, oh gosh, I'll never catch a 1-pound fish. Oh, you will. You'll catch some little bitty ones on these, and you'll be surprised. But still, on average, you'll catch bigger fish. So if I'm fishing a frog, typically I'm wanting a decent sized frog. and good heavy hooks, and I want it to be very soft so it collapses down. The other one that I use, probably of a traditional type of frog, is the river to sea bullywah. And I really, for my colors, again, chartreuse, black, white, and natural. Those are my four. The bullywah is, this is about the only one that comes with a real good chartreuse. The Strike King has one that's a little chartreusey, and I've used the Strike King, and that's okay. Some people love it, some people don't. It's a decent frog. It's a lot smaller. I mean, I don't know if you can really see the difference, but that is a much smaller frog compared to the bullywah. So if you're trying to scale down, it can be a good one, and it collapses pretty well. But this one is about the only frog that comes in this nice chartreuse color, and I like that color. I typically use it on slightly more stained water. I probably won't use it in crystal clear water very often, but on slightly stained water, I will use that, or in heavier, if there's a decent amount of vegetation, not heavy. This isn't the best mat frog. It's got a deep keel, so it tends to fall over, and the hooks tend to get stuck on stuff, and it just doesn't move that well. Where something with a little flatter, not as deep a keel, I don't know if you can kind of see that, but this one's got a real deep keel on it. This one does not so much, so this one works a little better in a mat, but this one walks well. I find it's a slower walk. I have to really methodically, slowly walk this frog. And when I'm walking it, I should probably cover that right here. When I'm walking it, you have to let the line go back to the bait. It's kind of like fishing a jerk bait. You need it to go sideways. Well, to go sideways, it has to have a line to turn. If you pull it, and you reel it, all the slack out of it, and leave it tight, all it can do is go forward. It doesn't have room to turn. The line won't let it. So you have to pull it and then put slack back so it can turn. And then you pull it and it turns, and then you leave slack back and it can turn all the way to this side. So it's going back and forth because you pull it and then give the slack back to it. So when you're working it, it's like working a spook. It's light little rod twitches, and we're not talking big rips. I mean, we're just talking light. That's it. And if it's a frog that I can walk faster, yep, I'll just kind of keep it walking. With this one, the river to sea, I find I have to walk it slower, just kind of very methodical, and making sure to give the line back to it, and just methodical, slow walk. That's how it seems to perform best. With, say, this one, the coppers, the live target coppers frog, I can work it a little faster. And then this is just an amazing frog. I really can't say enough good about it. I've pretty much got one of these on my boat all the time, no matter what. Clear water, dirty water, no grass, quite a bit of grass. I mean, this is one of those frogs that I pretty much have one on my, out on my deck all the time. And I catch, fish in open water. I catch them in weeds. I catch them in really rocky cover. It doesn't really matter. I'll catch them on this. I'll catch largemouth. I'll catch smallmouth. We'll cover that one a little bit more, but that I've got on all the time. But I can work that frog really fast. I mean, it just moves back and forth, just super snappy. It is tremendously easy to walk. So if you're looking for maybe a starter frog, that's a good one. So that's how you're walking. You're just light little rod twitches, and you're giving the line back to it so it has room to walk back and forth. That's really critical. So those are typical ones. I've used, this is a Spro. It's a smaller frog. Again, it's kind of the size of the Strike King. It's a decent frog. It collapses pretty well. I've used it a lot, caught hundreds and hundreds of fish on them. I've kind of, gone to the Copper's live target is, in heavier cover. That is the frog. I've got the river to sea frog in different colors, but mostly I'm after the river to sea frog for that chartreuse. I I don't typically fish it in other colors. It's just because no one else makes this color belly. If Copper's made it, I don't know if I'd fish this one that much. I probably would still fish it some, but I probably would have one of these tied on even more, the Copper's Live Target, but no one does. And it is a good frog. I don't know that I like the keel as much. It's not as versatile. It's more of a narrow frog for me. But having that color is so important to me that I fish it quite a bit still. But if someone else made that color, I don't know, you know, someone that made a frog that I really like the Coppers, I probably wouldn't fish it as much. And then branching out, boy, for a popping frog, I do like the River to Sea. And again, this is the bigger size. I really don't, I don't have much use for a teeny frog. Now, I know some people do, and I'm not knocking on it, but the way I fish, most of the time I'm looking for a bigger frog. And if I'm going to scale down, well, it's going to be that one anyway. So I'm, you know, when it comes to the River to Sea, bullywah, you know, the popping frog, I'm going with the bigger size, and I have caught a ton of fish on this bait as well. It walks pretty well, and that cup face really actually helps it walk. I don't fish it like a popper pretty much ever. I'm not just popping it, I'm walking it, and it walks well and spits a little extra water and commotion. I had when I was fishing a night fishing one time, and that was the business. A black popping frog. This I don't know if it was this particular frog, but it was this exact, you know, kind of frog. It was this. I don't think it was this frog, but it was, you know, this River to Sea, this color, this popping frog. Boy, that was the deal. And they choked it. For whatever reason, having a little more commotion with the popping, you know, the popper, and it was a very clear water, just it was nighttime. And having that cup face, you know, spitting a little extra water, walking it. And I was, you know, throwing it close to the bank, walking it through some weeds, walking it in open cover, and they just destroyed it. And a frog, it was a good bait to throw because it's hard to get hung up, and you're night fishing. It's a little hard to be quite as precise, so it's kind of by sound and feel. And you'd just be, you know, walking this frog and all, and kaloosh, and you could, I mean, just set the hook, and you'd have them every single time. So sometimes, you know, I'm using, you know, something like that even for night fishing, and it works really well. Again, white, you know, black. If the chartreuse, you know, those are my colors, very natural. But there is a good place for one of these, you know, popping frogs. I've used the Spro popping frog a little bit, but that was kind of before I found the Jackal. Once I found the Jackal, I hardly use this anymore. I caught a lot of fish on it, but I hardly use it anymore. It's a good frog. It's a nice soft plastic. Okay hook. It's not super beefy, but okay hook. Walks really well, spits a little extra water. But again, if I'm going with a slightly smaller, you know, popping frog that I can walk, I'm going to go with one of the Gavacho, the Jackal Gavacho frogs. Again, noticing a pattern: white, black, natural. They don't have the chartreuse, so I don't have a chartreuse one in that Gavacho frog. But again, if I'm being honest with you guys, I'm fishing this one 99% of the time if I'm going to put one of these frogs on, and I have one on my deck almost all the time. Now, branching out just a little bit, covering a few more frogs, the Teckle sprinkler frog. That is a killer frog. Yeah, I don't use it all the time, but it is a killer frog for, you know, mildly heavy grass. If it's like a thick mat, forget it, you know. But and if it's in total open water, most of the time I'm going to fish the buzzbait or the whopper plopper. But if there is any weeds, you know, that are just going to get fouled up in the buzzbait or the whopper plopper, I'm going to fish this thing, and you can cover some water and get an idea of where the fish are, what they're relating to. And most of the time you'll get them in the boat, but sometimes they'll strike at it and miss. And you say, you know, well, why would you do that? Well, it helps me cover some water and figure out where they are, because they're probably relating to the same kind of things. Maybe where 2 or 3 types of weeds come together, or where there's weeds and rock, or weeds and a log, or for whatever it is, there's something different about that spot. Well, you're going to put it together faster by covering some water. So again, notice the pattern: white, black, chartreuse, and I don't usually use a clear one in that, because as we're covering, I want them to really see it. We're usually getting into some weeds, so I don't typically fish a clear one in those conditions, but I will fish all those three colors, and I do love that frog. And it's on a decent hook, not killer, but decent hook on it, and the plastic is so soft, it's amazing. You have a great hookup ratio on it. And then let's talk a little bit about modifications on almost all my frogs. Unless I'm fishing super, super heavy cover, most of the time, I'm going to take my pliers on almost all my frogs. I'm going to bend the hook up just a little bit, and maybe out, just depending on how it's set up, but out just a little bit. And if I'm noticing I'm really missing them, I might bend them out and up a little bit more. But if I'm killing them, then I don't need to. And all it's doing is just giving just a little more grab. When you come across that, it just takes a little less, and I could bend these just a little bit more. But it takes just a little, it's a little easier to connect. And I have a terrific hookup ratio. That might be a bit much on that one. That one might just be just a hair too much. But if I'm not getting stuck in the weeds, I'm going to leave it as well. If I find that I'm fishing the frog and I'm constantly getting hung up on weeds, and it's always fouling up, I'll tip them in a little bit. But I like them so I can run my hand across and I'm going to get stuck. It doesn't take much to get hooked up with that. That's how I like to run them. And then I'll typically trim the tails. You can even see the difference right here. Okay, I've trimmed this one up. I haven't trimmed this one. So you can see the difference in length. I've cut quite a bit off that. I would just take it off to about that point, and maybe just a little bit off of either side of these is what I'm going to do. Same with this. This just came out of the package. Same deal. I'm going to tip those hooks up and out just a little bit, and that's a little much for me. I'm going to probably trim it off like that. I want it to walk really easily. I don't want too much drag back there, and I really don't want the fish seeing this and biting all of that. I mean, that's a lot of bait right there that they're just going to grab and they're going to pull it under. I'm going to set the hook and nothing. I want them to get the frog. So if I trim a little bit off that, they're going to more likely get the frog. And if I find they're constantly short striking it, I might even trim it up even more. But I'm not going to start there. I'm going to start, somewhere in this vicinity. I'm going to take off and just trim it up a little bit. Boy, now let's move on to the rod, line, and reel. I'm going to fish 65-pound braid almost exclusively. Maybe if I'm fishing a frog a lot in open cover, maybe I'll use 50-pound, which is what I typically do with a buzzbait. Maybe I'll go to 50-pound, but most of the time I'm fishing a frog in some type of cover. Walking it in open water some, but it's not, it's not exclusively that. If I was just doing that, yeah, I would lighten the line to 50-pound line. But I'm pretty much always going just straight braid, 65-pound. I know guys that go with 80, and they're welcome to do that, and they're probably fishing thicker mats than I usually fish, and maybe it makes sense. But for me, I get a little more castability out of 65 rather than 80, and it's strong enough that I pretty much never ever break off on a frog. And then you've seen me do this, but I'll typically take a Sharpie as this whitens out, as I've used it a lot. I'll just take a Sharpie and Sharpie 6-7 feet of it, so the line's not in the water, as visible. And you'll sometimes see, the fish do react to the line sometimes. You'll cast and it'll lay down on the water, and a fish will move right where the line is, reacting to your line hitting the water. So I think it matters a little bit, but I don't lose a whole bunch of sleep over it. And then for the reels, geez, I used to fish Quantums a bunch. Now it's hard for me to get away from the Shimanos, but I used to fish Quantums a lot. I really have a hard time beating the Quantum Smoke. It's the Speed Freak. It's like 8.1 to 1. Super fast reel. And it's taken a beating. I mean, an absolute beating. I have fished them. I've got a couple of these, and I mean, beat the snot out of them. And they've got a good drag. They're very light. They handle the fish well, and they cast like a mile. I mean, you can tune them up, and just almost nothing can outcast these. And I have no idea why. They're not the most high-end reel by any means, but they're super light. And when I'm fishing a frog, I want it on a light combination. I'm fishing it all the time, and your wrist gets exhausted as you're constantly flipping that thing. I mean, just just working. Your wrist gets tired, your arm gets tired. So I want something light and strong, has a good drag, and as big a handle as I can. The handle's a little smaller than I prefer, but it still does a good job. And you can, kind of pull them and reel down and pull them, and you're trying to get those fish out of that cover as fast as possible. When they get that frog, I hit them, I drill them, and then just grind on them and get them to the boat. I'm not messing around with it. I don't want them to come off. If you give them time, they're going to bury themselves in the weeds. So I'm not going to play those fish. I'm not going to give them any extra time. I want them to be in the boat before they realize they've been caught. And so it works really well. I have used the Shimano, the Corrado K, a very tough reel. I love how smooth it is. It is so smooth. It is smoother than something like this. But boy, these Quantums are just a great reel. And this is a pretty budget-friendly reel. It's the Corrado K XG, so it's fast. It's the 8 to 1, I think, again, 8.5 to 1, so very, very fast. I don't think I'd fish a frog on a reel slower than a 7 to 1, but if I can get an 8 to 1, even better. If I'm going faster than that, I don't know, maybe it's going to be hard to really reel it in and winch a big fish in, but I do want a lot of, be able to pick up a lot of line quickly. And also, if I've made a cast and I've missed a fish, they struck at it, I swung and I missed. And some people say, well, you shouldn't swing hard, just kind of feel them. I think you're going to lose way more fish that way because they're going to have time with it, spit it out, or get you buried in the weeds. So you hooked up with them, but they're going to get you buried in the weeds. So I hit them. When they have it, like they get it, I hit them. I don't waste any time, and I hit them with it. Now, every once in a while, the frog comes with me. I can tell I've never touched him. No problem. I'm going to cast right back to that spot. So I want to reel that in really, really fast because he's still there. If I haven't touched him, that's a good thing. I'll cast right back to it, and a lot of times I'll catch that fish. If I've partly caught him, it's really, really, really rare that you're going to hook up with him again. He's been hit with it. He's not going to mess with it again. Now sometimes I won't catch him even with a follow-up cast, and I'll try it a couple times. If I don't, if I can, I'll pitch something in there, a creature bait, a jig, or something, and slow it down and just really methodically work that. And I'll catch them sometimes with that. And sometimes you'll just never catch that fish, but oftentimes you will. The percentages are pretty good. So I like a really fast reel. That Corrado K is, again, a pretty decent price point reel. The SLX would be another one. Get a high-speed reel, but the Shimano SLX, that would be a good one. But I for a pretty budget-friendly reel, I do like that Smoke, the Speed Freak. And for the rod, that's important. This is the X-Pride, my favorite frog rod of all time. It's the 7.3 extra heavy. So 7.3, it's got enough length to make a killer cast, but it's short enough that you can actually work that and not be constantly slapping the water of the boat with the rod tip. And they're incredibly light. So, boy, just the best rod. And they're strong, so, I mean, when you hit them, you can drive those hooks home. You do have to have a pretty strong hook set to get them. But I enjoy a strong hook set. So, I mean, I absolutely whale into them. And sometimes, there's been days I've caught 80 fish on a frog and your sides are just beat up because your hook set actually, pounding your side to get a good strong hook set. Another rod I've used in the past, I don't use it much now because it's so much heavier, but it was a great rod for it. And if you're looking for a budget rod, a more budget combination, this would be a good one. This is the is it Veritas? Yeah, Veritas, Abu Garcia Veritas, and it is a medium heavy. It's not quite as much of a broomstick, but I feel like their medium heavy is a little bit more like everyone else's heavy, at least to me. And it's super strong blank. You don't get the feeling you can wail on them, and it's a 7.3 again, 7.3 medium heavy. You can wail on them with braided line. This is I've got it as a swim jig right now, so it's not braided line, and it's a swim jig, as you can see, but just showing you the rod. I mean, you can just wail on them with braided line, and it handles it really, really well. You never feel, I've had a few rods that you're like, man, I feel like I'm gonna snap this thing in half. Not with this one. It is heavy, but it's budget friendly. I wanna say they used to always be 99 bucks, and every once in a while you could get them on sale for like 89 or 79. Maybe they're a little bit more than that now, but still a budget friendly rod. It is a good rod. It's just heavy, so if you're fishing it all day, it does wear on you, and that's the only downside. I will sometimes use it on the sprinkler frog if I've got all my other rods tied up with moving, walking frogs. With this one, you're not walking it; you're just pitching it out and winding it back, and so the weight really isn't as big of a deal. It's not so hard on your wrist because you're just winding it back. So that's why I've even got it on the the swim jig. And you don't need, I like sensitivity, but you don't need it because it's visual. Or you're going to hear it at night. You're going to hear it. They're going to kaloosh. You're not going to see it anyway. But in the daytime, you're going to see it. So you're going to pay attention. And that is important. Pay attention to what your frog's doing. And sometimes you'll see a fish coming to get it, and you'll just kind of keep working it, and then whoosh, they got it. Or maybe you saw a swirl, and you didn't get it, but you saw a swirl. So you cast back there, and you get them. So you want to pay attention as you're working a frog, and even listening for the bluegill popping. So they'll make this sort of kissing sound, and they're going after bugs, the bluegills. Well, that's probably a good mat. If there's no bluegill sucking and sucking down bugs, probably not the best mat. Just because the bass are there to feed on the bluegill or some other bait fish, and knowing that the bluegill are in there feeding is a good sign that the bass might be feeding on them. So paying attention to that, listening for that sound, watching with your eyes, you'll catch some extra fish doing that. But this is not a bad rod, and it loads up great. And it probably is one, it's not as stiff, so if you have a weaker hook set, this is probably a good one. And maybe you downsize the rod, the frog, to say like the Spro frog, or the Strike King frog, something like that, or the Gavacho frog. Maybe you wouldn't use as big a frog as this River to Sea frog, or the Bullywah, the bigger of the two, the Bullywah, and maybe not even the Copper's Live Target. That's a pretty good sized frog, and if you look at the hooks, they tip in, so you're fighting against that. They keep them pinned really well when you really get a good hook set, but you're fighting against two hooks, driving them in there, and they're working against each other. Now, it great once you get them pinned, but it can be hard if you don't have a strong hook set to really get those hooks in there. So if you have a weaker hook set, I'd probably go downsize the frog, maybe straighten the hooks out like this one. The hooks are very straight on it. Makes it easier to set the hook. Maybe go with a little less power of a rod. I'm using an extra heavy in the X-Bride, and I really prefer that. But if you don't have as strong as hook set, maybe downsize just a little bit. Go with a less powerful rod and a smaller frog, and you'll be dialed. You'll be good. But this is for budget friendly. And then again, I would probably pair it up with a Smoke, Corrado K. If you really want budget friendly, SLX. And you've got a great frog rod for very reasonable money. I think that's about it. I don't think I'm leaving much out. I mean, we've covered frogs, modifications, rods, reels, line. I think we've got it in this one. But if I've left something out and you've got a question, leave a comment below. I'll get to that. And love sharing and learning together. All right, till next time. Stay after it.